All right, good. So yes, thank you for that introduction. I tell people my name is Karen Washington. I tell people I'm a farmer. I grow food. I feed people body, mind, and spirit. So I want to talk about the invisible gender, which is the right for women to farm. So for centuries, women have been fighting for equal rights, from exploration to voting, civil rights, to the present Me Too movement. My personal journey has taken me from the concrete jungles of New York City to farming with my friends on 5 acres of land up in the Hudson Valley. But today I want to talk to you about our movement as women farmers. Did you know that prior to 2002, the data for the census looked at only one principal operator of a farm, which happened to be a male? That meant that meant the contribution of women and minorities and small farms were non-existent prior to 2007. In 2007 is when the National Agricultural Statistics Service improved its data collection. Today, women in ag have vast opportunities. In 2017, the census notes that there are over 1.2 million women farmers. That's nearly a third of our nation's farmers. We generate $12.9 billion in revenue. But we're not only farmers, we're scientists and chefs, entrepreneurs, owners and operators of small businesses. We are policymakers and activists. We are involved in every aspect of agriculture. Yet, with all that we have accomplished, all the gains we have attained, we have allowed ourselves to be fragmented along racial, economic, social, and demographic lines. Wealth and opportunities and resources are still afforded to those with privilege. So if we're going to talk about women's contribution towards farming, we must talk in terms of the globalization of agriculture. You see, women in agriculture is not an isolated local movement. To see us in isolation strips us of our power as a unified force to be reckoned with. For eons, women have been the backbone of agriculture. Yet we have and still are victims of oppression, income and gender inequality, inadequate education and political representation, and lastly, lack of power. Even today, we lack the respect and recognition of our place in the annals of history. Here in the United States, although there has been some growth in the number of women farmers, however, the amount of land owned by women is dismal. And for women of color, non-existent. And like most farmers, especially small farmers, we are struggling to make ends meet. And many of us have second jobs. And what about our farm workers, our women farm workers? Where do they stand? They too do a tremendous service to our economy, climbing 23% of the higher farm workforce. Yet, where are their voices, seeming invisible as they continue to fight for decency, fair wages, and health benefits? We as women in agriculture must stand together. We have a powerful story to tell, one of self-reliance, determination, stewardship, and leadership. Today, we have a unique opportunity to change a system which should recognize our diversity and inclusion as assets. Our global sister farmers in developing countries are facing similar challenges. They make up almost half of the world's farmers. And over the last few decades, they have broadened their involvement in agriculture. The number of female-headed households has increased as more men are leaving the farms and going into cities for employment. Today, the world is facing a unique challenge of ending hunger and poverty. Here in the United States, we too face the same dilemma. Our challenge is not growing enough food, but getting that food to the people that need it the most. With better access to information, education, capital, and technology, women can alter food production and consumption so that land and resources are used sustainably. This is why, for me, farming goes beyond just growing food. The question we must ask ourselves is, why does hunger and poverty still exist? I was once told that the food system was broken and needed to be fixed. And I used to believe it until I realized it's a caste system victimizing the poor. So I, along with others, started to question and challenge the food system and believe that the food system did not need to be fixed. It needed to change. And that change was shifting of power. As women, we must be up for the challenge to call out injustices when we see them. Getting more women as farmers means nothing without providing the resources for us to be actively engaging in dismantling some of the injustices in the food system. So, what are some of the facts? Let's see if I can get this so you can see me. We have an aging population of farmers. Women farmers are older than men when it comes to years. Most farm operators are men and white. 27% of all US farm operators are women, yet less than 1% are women of color. Only 12% are single principal farm operators, and nearly 36% of women principal operators are 65 years or older, of which 28% will tell you they are retired. And women generally operate farms that are smaller than average and have less land. We all must agree that in order to survive, we must focus on how to entice the next generation to farm in such a way that makes farming practical, profitable, and socially responsible. As a Black female farmer, I can tell you there are so many young Black and brown women who want to farm. They tell me their stories. They tell me their stories in a reason. Maybe it's spirituality, holding on to their family land, understanding their ancestral connectiveness, a sense of belonging, or just for health. Farming is changing as it's becoming more analytical and data-driven. Consumers want food that is fresh, local, and affordable, and farmers want to grow more food efficiently. The commodification of our food has caused us to focus more on profits and less on people and the environment. We struggle with the ways of feeding ourselves while making a profit to survive. And our indigenous people, once on this land, never thought about owning land, owning people, owning seeds to make a profit. Yet understanding the dynamic processes of change is crucial to better position women for faster growth and economic development. We see this happening because of climate change and technology and increased population and high value market demands. All are contributing factors in this new global economy, which will create opportunities for both men and women. Thus, it is imperative as women, we position ourselves to be part of this growing advancement in agriculture. Therefore, our voices must be involved politically at all three branches of government. No longer should we stand by to look at some backdoor deals without our voices or deals that negatively impact our lives and our family. See if I can move. The next slide. The World Food Organization has already predicted that by 2050, there'll be 9 billion more people on this planet, most of which will be in urban areas. The Food and Agricultural Organization states that we need 70% increase in more food production to feed people. They're predicting we have to grow more, harvest more, distribute more, and consume more food efficiently. And if we believe in global warming, then we must face the fact that agriculture is among the greatest contributors, emitting greenhouse gases from animal waste, fertilizers, and deforestation, as well as polluting our waterways with toxic runoff. Farming, as we all know, is the most thirstiest, using precious amount of water, as well as contributing to the loss of biodiversity and wildlife habitat because of monocropping and clearing areas of grassland and forestry for development. But all is not lost. As we become more educated and knowledgeable around the effects of climate change, this offers us an opportunity to speak up and speak out about the environmental challenges posed by agriculture. But let us not be drawn into a debate on who's at fault or what's better, organic or conventional farming. The advances in agricultural knowledge and technology by both can create an array of new opportunities for farmers, dictating what is produced, how it's produced, where it's produced, and who are the producers. Agriculture can also be the engine that technology can be used to help reduce hunger and food insecurity globally. But for women, here lies the uncertainty. For in the past, we have been excluded from lucrative high volume markets dominated by men with power. As trade becomes more globalized and profitable, opportunities for sales in markets exist more than ever before. Given the same access to resources as men, women could produce 20 to 30% more food. Food output in developing countries would increase by 2.5 to 4%, enough to feed 100 to 150 million more people. These statistics from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization aren't just numbers, but a formula for global food security. Yet many women, especially minorities and the poor, are unable to compete. The biggest threat to all women is gender inequality. This power dynamic of gender inequality must be broken. So women, we must band together. We must share our resources, share our land, purchase from one another, support one another. The air of complacency, fear, falsehoods, and lack of empathy stemming from injustices are tools being used against us. We have a right to speak up against injustice. We have a right to demand equal pay for equal work. We have a right to demand access to land and grants and technology. In this digital age, no farmer should be without means to communicate, and yet the digital divide still exists. We as women are not asking for a handout, but a hand in when it comes to the decision-making process. We need to make sure we have more women involved in the political system. You should know your local politician, your extension agent. You should know the history of your land. Pay homage to those whose land we stand on. We must preserve indigenous knowledge and history. Let's think about gifting land to the next generation of women farmers. I once read a sign that said, local collaborations leads to global solutions. Let's break down the barriers women are facing by using our collective power. So as we go forth, the question we must ask ourselves is not what we need, but what we want. Because when you want something, it puts you in a position of power. So what are some of the things that we want? Let's see. We want access to land. Women produce 80% of crops and own only 1% of land. By giving women the same access as men to agricultural resources, it will increase the production on women's farms in developing countries by 20 to 30%. We want access to funding. Women tend to face greater challenges when it comes to securing credit. They are generally not given the right tools and information when borrowing from an institution. And without assistance and support, we find it difficult to access much needed funding. Did you know that women receive 7% of the agricultural extension services and less than 10% of the credit offered to small scale farmers? We want access to education and new practices. Most agricultural extension focuses on large scale commercial farming with limited research conducted on small farm techniques. Small farms usually owned by women. This needs to change. Access to technology. Most advanced agriculture uses technology and data to help with farming practices. Most women are not given the same opportunity to use technology as a resource. Training programs for women, especially in finance and technology, are essential. We need this so that we can use data and farming practices to better manage our businesses. Market opportunities. The lack of market research and information limits women farmers to market opportunities. We are usually confined to local markets, which at times are low in price. We need access to global markets where there's more lucrative pricing. Lastly, we need to invest in women farmers. Empowering and investing in women, especially in rural areas, will significantly increase productivity, reducing hunger, poverty, malnutrition. And investing women of color as farmers will encourage the new generation of farmers seeking farmers that look like them. As we look back on the days of hardships, policies, old habits, and traditions, which are usually hard to change, the world now is wide open than ever and open to change due to technology and social media. The struggle for self-determination and independence and power are no longer isolated and localized. It has truly become a global movement of reform. As we come together, let us recognize our collective power and demand change, for the world is changing. And in the midst of change, it's women who will be at the forefront, ready for the challenge. Therefore, it is important that education and technology are taught to women. Through financial literacy and enterprise, women can own land and businesses, interrupting the perpetual cycle of hunger and poverty. And when it comes to the environment, we must make sure that the health and well-being of women and children are of the utmost importance, free of toxin, and a place that is safe both physically and mentally. If we're going to address pertinent issues affecting our society, then the role of women in agriculture must change. We must be careful not to have outsiders create an image that sees women farmers as the one in need. In fact, worldwide, there are so many successful women farmers, despite all the challenges and obstacles we faced. We as women farmers, we are not the service, but must be of service to help grow an economy that benefits us all. Equal pay for equal work. Women must be at the table and not on the menu when it comes to the decision-making process. Our ideas and voices matter. Together we stand here to recognize and appreciate the efforts of all women farmers and those of past generations on whose shoulders we stand on. So in conclusion, what can folks do? Well, we can all support small and local women farmers. We can make sure that women have access to land, training for technology, financial literacy, and that technology is available and affordable. We must encourage diversity and inclusion as part of being a woman and our assets. We must be proactive instead of reactive, and we must be actively participating not in only growing food, but growing community. And we must share information and resources because better communication is needed. So let us celebrate our triumphs, our victories, our sacrifices, as we recognize our importance and contribution in the field of agriculture. The power of women in agriculture occurs when voices are heard and change happens. I would like to end with a quote from Ai-jen Poo, who is the executive director of the National Domestic Worker Alliance. Her quote: "The greatest thing we did was we began to listen to our own stories. And that's when it happened. We stopped looking up to those in power and started looking around at the women standing beside us from different backgrounds, working in different sectors, of different ethnicities, with different stories, and realized our strength is not in our individualism, but in our diversity and the power that we need to claim is our own." Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.